Now, it is a real privilege and a pleasure to have Hubertus Kohle with us. Hubertus Kohle, who is one of the few serious art historians who is also interested in the digital humanities. So it is sometimes almost two professions to be really up to date in all these technological and digital questions, and also doing scholarly work in different areas. And Hubertus Kohle is one of them in Germany. He is professor of art history at the art history department of the University of Munich. His special fields are 18th and 19th century French and German art. He has published widely in this field. And what you do to know more about him, just go on his website. And you'll find all the material and a full bibliography of what he did. Let me only mention that I was very impressed by one very important book about Menzel and the 19th century history painting, which has become a very often quoted and cited book about this important 19th century German artist. So please join me in welcoming Hubertus Kohle.
Well, thank you very much for this incredible pleasure and honor to speak here, especially to the director of this institution, Thomas Gaetkens. I will now speak up occasionally for what my colleague Johanna Drucker called so nicely crazy undertakings, but this is for the sake of contrast also. Open access is one of the most challenging trends in contemporary sciences and humanities. Happily, the Getty, with its online publication and coordination project of many early art historical texts, is now perhaps the most significant player in the field with regard to the history of the arts, and together with several American and European libraries well known for their past engagement. Open access has a lot of implications for the future of knowledge, acquisition and distribution, for new ways to analyze data with the aim to find implicit patterns in them, for the relationship between more and less developed countries. Speaking about Europe and the US, digitization exemplarily shows their difference, and please take the following as a genuine compliment in the beginning of my talk. Europe reflects, hesitates, the US perceive the chances and then act. That does, of course, not mean that the US does not reflect, as it does not mean that Europe never acts. But even if there is a lot of cliché in this assessment, there's also more than a grain of truth in it. When Google began to retro-digitize their printed cultural production of world history, we were all amazed, and most Europeans more bothered than delighted. They stressed the copyright infringements and the danger of a huge private monopoly, and they did that rightly, but at the same time mostly seeing only the negative side of the enterprise. Of course, there are exceptions, and they have become more frequent in the last years. Jean-Noël Jeannenet, at that time director of the French National Library, complained that the Google initiative would Americanize the internet even further, and he invited the Europeans to oppose something to it. And he was certainly right with this assessment. Now there is Europeana, an enterprise whose success looks dubious to me. Why didn't European libraries, in a collective attempt, approach this promising project back in the late 1990s? You know, this is a long time ago, of course. Say 100 huge libraries from Portugal to Russia, from Sweden to Italy, every single library digitizing 20,000, 30,000 books. In spite of the technical and logistical problems, this would, of course, have been possible with the convenient financial funding, even without Google's help, which in those remote times did not even yet exist. But there was no agenda to do it, and neither the will. Although as times go by, it becomes more and more clear, and this is my introductory thesis, in the future, digitizable objects which are not in the internet tend not to exist at all anymore. And there are not many objects of scholarly interest which are not digitizable. Here again, Europeans, and especially European art history professors, generally do not accept this or even oppose it. In my opinion, it would by all means be better to come to terms with it and find good ways to use this new and tremendous abundance. And just one further sentence on open access and the less developed countries. I remember an initiative of 26 Ukrainian university presidents a couple of years ago who desperately invited European and American universities to publish more extensively in open access because they could not afford all the expensive books. Wouldn't it be a promising way of development aid to offer people in the poor countries an access to our knowledge? Certainly a better one than financing improper structures as is often done today, because it would allow them to help themselves instead of just receiving help as almsmen. What I have been invited to do here is to provide you with some reflections on impacts that electronic online publications might have on the way we work in the field of art history. I will do that and add some comments on new collaborative perspectives which are made possible by these digital sources. Contrary to the somewhat pretentious tone of my title, I will definitely limit myself to the textual field in order to stay close to this occasion here at the Getty and not at all address questions of digital visuality, albeit these are particularly fascinating. And I will just give hints without even the slightest claim for completeness, aiming less at digital specialists who will not learn a lot of new stuff, but rather to the general art historian. What is the difference between a printed text and its digital double? At first sight, there is none. And indeed, this difference cannot be detected phenomenologically because the whole difference, to my mind, is grounded in the usage of these texts. This is my principal thesis. The digital text loses its hieratic character inherent in its printed version because of its materiality. It becomes fluid, multifariously reusable and prone to be recontextualized. This is a paradigm shift whose vigor cannot be overestimated. The fluidity of text is exemplarily demonstrated in Wikipedia, an encyclopedia mostly mocked by traditional humanists and art historians, although secretly used by them. In Wikipedia, a text is never finished. There is often one first and completely fragmentary version, and then a whole bunch of people continue to work on it. I'm quite sure that this will also be a fundamental technique of future scholarly work organized in such tremendous shared workspaces as in Bamboo, now built up at several American and international universities, among them the University of California at Berkeley, partner university of my own in Munich. And it is true everywhere, not only in huge editorial and encyclopedic projects. The strong intertextual constituent which lies at the heart of this fluid text is not at all absent in traditionally printed text, and not surprisingly, this might become clearer as soon as these will have been retro-digitized. New ways to understand their interdependency will come up. Hidden meanings in such texts not even known to the writer, him or herself, can be revealed by aggregating and clustering them electronically, revealing implicit meaningful structures bound to their historicity. Based on huge text corpora, we might be able to reconstruct something like thinking styles, or what Michael Baxendale called the period eye, which varies individually, socially, and historically in art theory, history, and criticism. One way to do this is to use the Google online Ngram algorithm. In the context of a cooperative project on the cultural life of the French Restoration, I'm interested in the early history of lithography. When I enter the word in French form lithographie in the Ngram viewer, which covers an amount of about 5 million books, restricting the text corpus to French and the time period to 1790 to 1870, I get the result you see in the screen. There is no hit before the middle of the 1790s, which is evident because this is the moment of its invention. Following this, there is a small peak around There's a small peak around 18. I could have said that in other words, that's true. around 1800, which might be the expression of the early discussion of a new artistic and communicative technique. Not much happens until the end of the empire, and indeed the use of lithography under Napoleon is limited. Afterwards, in the Restoration and later, lithography, you see that, I don't have to show that. Lithography becomes one of the most potent means of an engaged art, and you see this in the steep rise of the graph of the curve. There is a clear climax in the beginning and the middle of the 1830s. I cannot prove that without further inquiries, of course, but to me it is quite obvious that this must be the effect of intense discussions about and Louis Philippe's reaction to Honoré Daumier's and others' aggressive lithographic criticism of royal misbehaviors in La Caricature and the Charivari. You might say that we just get an illustration of what we knew before. But what about another, even heavier peak in the middle of the 1850s and the sharp drop around 1860? With regard to my own experience, this is one of the most significant qualities of computerized research. Contrary to its reputation, the computer does not only give precise answers to problems I pose him, but it has the characteristics of a recommender system. It suggests problems that have to be tackled afterwards. And it proposes solutions which have to be classified by a human mind. Of course, you have to correlate the whole thing with other parameters, as for example, the quantity of printed publications on the whole, but this could also be done probably only on the grounds of digitized sources. In any case, if my assessment is true, but there is no need to fear that a hermeneutic discipline, as opposed to hard sciences, might lose its core characteristics. So this is my first sub-thesis. Digital open access allows for far-reaching analysis of implicit knowledge which is stored in text. When will the moment come that we will have examinations like these in an art historical master thesis or dissertation? Only when we mentally overcome the traditional divide between C.P. Snow's two cultures without losing our own identity, but as far as I can see, there have been taken clearly visible steps in the last years in this direction. They mostly have not yet entered current research practice in the humanities, but they will, or to be more precise, they have entered disciplines as literary studies and a lot less our own field of the history of the arts. This is a particular pity, as visuality offers an extremely interesting field of digitally based analysis. But this is not my topic here. Scholarly work has always been part of an ongoing research procedure, a step in an open process evolving without ever reaching an end. And this will be so even more clearly as soon as we will have definitely switched, if we have definitely switched to digital publishing. The fluidity of the text opens it up for comments, discussions, and evaluations. Now I'm approaching the crazy undertakings. We will have textual and visual layers, one put above the other, continuously enriching and making more complex the whole argumentation, allowing for multiple views and stressing the subjectivity of any single approach. Here, the medium can become the ideal form of a fundamental insight that modern philosophy of science proposes. There is no ideal Platonic overview of the real sense of history. Every approach is by nature dependent on a specific perspective. You can call this my second sub-thesis: the computer is the ultimate postmodern epistemological machine. This especially allows for new ways of reviewing in pre-digital times, and even if it was only for the limited resources of paper which were used for the printing process, scholarly texts had to be reviewed before being published. The filtering process, to put it in another way, was done avant la lettre. The drawbacks are well known, especially in view of a certain tendency to slow down research shifts. The possibility not to entrust this review to one individual, but to an entire research community made possible by digital online media should be worth being attempted. Apart from that, I'm quite sure that as soon as online publishing will have obtained a bigger momentum, it will be the usual and not only, but the usual practice. Publish first, filter later. That is the concise dictum of Clay Shirky, New York-based internet guru and one of the visionaries of social media, with which he summarizes this groundbreaking new perspective. As far as scholarly publication is concerned, the internet is the problem and at the same time its solution. We all know the complaints of conservative representatives in our field, if we do not ourselves belong to them, who maintain that too much is published and this tendency will increase with the internet. But the briefly described ways to classify a contribution, to which we would have to add automatic classification methods like download or link statistics and linked-based evaluations of the commentator's qualifications, also allow for definitely more precise and focused searches for relevant papers. And if we add such tools as automatic text summarization to this, there might come up another element of recommendation, not in order to replace the reading of a whole text, but again as a way out of the overwhelming abundance of all that will be at our fingertips. Or consider such ingenious systems as Zotero, which allow you to set up and to evaluate your own bibliography. The difference to traditional bibliographies, you can open them to everyone in the internet, sharing your information and giving an ideal source for relevance metrics. This is similar in the new ebook practice. If you ever read a book on Amazon's Kindle, you will have noticed passages that were underlined. This means that they have been stressed by at least 3 other readers of the book. Why not use this as an implicit element of reviewing? Of course, not in the closed commercial system in Amazon, but in open access, because otherwise it couldn't work in the internet. To call this shift revolutionary is no exaggeration. To date, a heavy selection takes place before publication, excluding by trend what does not fit into current perspectives. In the internet culture, this selection is executed post festum after publication. The long tail, Chris Anderson's famous description of contributions not even considered for publication before, now has a chance to be discovered and to move in the direction of established productions to the left, where the short beginning shows their massive presence. And this does not only refer to the ongoing publication process, but also to retro-digitized text, which in the long run will be re-evaluated in an ever-moving evaluation process. Here the term review gets a much broader meaning than before. It includes every sort of comments, but it does so post festum and not as a means to decide upon the publication of the text or its refusal. So here you get my third sub-thesis. In a massive cooperative effort, we will be able to manage the overwhelming abundance of sources created in the internet. But if we have to approach it, which is not as utopian as it might appear, because most of it happens indirectly while we work with the material. If this sounds too abstract to you, this is not readable, but that doesn't matter. I can put it in more concrete terms. I remember my first inquiries in electronic databases, which has been around the middle of the 1990s. The topic was an examination of the reception of the French Revolution in the arts of the French Second Empire, part of an interdisciplinary project on the perception of the revolution in 19th century French and international culture. When I entered my keywords in Joconde, a museum image database, which at that time was already quite rich, I got a lot of promising hints to relevant paintings and sculptures, which in the one or the other way broached the issue of the French Revolution. What was surprising and only partly connected to my limited notions about the abundance of the artistic production of those times was the fact that many works, I would even think the majority, was completely unknown to me, and that in very many cases even the names of the artists showed up for the very first time, with me for the first time. Working with electronic databases, and in a very broad sense, books are also databases, has a definitely decanonizing effect. Now I lost the line. Using them will confront us with a wealth of sources not even known before, unsuccessful in the canonization process, which established a narrow spectrum of accepted authorities, redefining, if not even toppling, traditional classifications. The general constellation is similar to the one described before. What might look threatening in the beginning because of its sheer abundance will become manageable later on, as soon as this abundance is classified by user comments and evaluations. In this regard, I remember a discussion with a German historian who plans a comparative history of the English and French Ancien Régime. He told me that his inquiries in the French side of the project looked a lot simpler to him, not because of the wealth of information he had, but paradoxically because of its lack. Keep in mind that this was quite some years ago. Now there's a lot on Gallica. For England, he could dispose of the entire printed production because this has been completely retro-digitized several years ago already. For France, the research is relatively simple because it is based on accepted scholarly opinions, on filters which give a secure, albeit arguable guarantee. In the English case, these opinions could and had to be checked with the digitized publications, an operation only feasible on the grounds of cooperative annotation processes which pre-classified the material. Again, the wealth of the material will dramatically increase in the digitization process, but at the same time, its modes of classification will increase as well. The so-called Web 2.0 is ready to organize this process, and we should stop to trivialize and slam it, but see to making good use of it in the scholarly community. So this is another sub-thesis. Computerization has a deeply decanonizing effect, and this is of course also true for the n-gram analysis I showed you a minute ago. No. One way to make use of this interactive web is what insiders call social tagging, and I will go into that somewhat more intensely because we work on a social tagging project in Munich together with information scientists of my university. While we worked on this project, we found that the methodological implications of it are far more wide-reaching than we thought they were in the beginning. Social tagging means that you let things be annotated and that you have it done by any form of community. This can be a specialized community, as the one we have in a disciplinary scholarly community, but it can also be everyone. We decided for the second way, which we could do because of the nature of its aims, and to which I will come back at once. When you leave the annotation process to everyone, we call this crowdsourcing, and crowds are now very numerous in the internet. Some statistics speak about 2 billion internet users, or 2/3 of all inhabitants in the industrialized countries. What, and now don't laugh please, what if we could use such a crowd for our purposes? Take an image database with 20 million items, which would really be a huge one. If every internet user, and of course there are also a lot of experts among them, would only one single time enter an annotation to our images, we would have keywords. We would have 100 keywords for more or less every art image in the world with which we could search for them. Okay, as people will often enter identical words, we will have maybe only 30 keywords, but this is still a lot. Of course, this is a utopia for technical and logistical reasons, but it gives an idea of the power of the internet. In any case, this utopia was the point of departure for our crowdsourcing project, with which we tried to enrich our own image database of about 35,000 artworks. With Artigo, we did not involve 2 billion, but only 20,000, and even among those 20,000, only a fraction was really continuously engaged. But within 4 years, they created 5 million taggings for our images, which means more than 100 on average for every item. And you can search with these keywords. I will not go into the details of this project. I just tell you that it is organized in the form of a game with which we try to reach an automatic quality control, because every tag is only matched in case it has been given to by at least 2 persons in an identical form. The idea is, by the way, the one of an ingenious American information scientist, Louis van Aan from Carnegie Mellon University. What is important here are some general methodological aspects that are prone to be taken into account for other projects as well, something in the field of book annotation, for example. But don't be afraid, it's just a very hallucinatory proposal which cannot be transformed into practice within the next 2 weeks. As art historians, we were first only interested in a quick construction of massively annotated, huge, searchable image databases. And of course, this is still an important perspective, and it really works, even for more sophisticated uses. But while working on the project, we noticed that it had many other fascinating points of interest, perspectives which open up the field of art history into a lively interdisciplinarity. The idea is that not only the objects annotated are of interest, but also the subjects annotating. It is known from psychocognitive studies that people with different sexual, cultural, social, and generational background look differently at pictures, and this might also find an expression in their tagging habits, in the quality of the tags, but also in their sequence. This must be of profound interest for neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists, representatives of intercultural communication studies, and others. Why not open up art history in such directions? We are very much in the beginning of such developments, but I'm looking forward to them with great expectations. So here you have another sub-thesis. Computerization opens up our field in 2 ways, to the general public and to other disciplines. Considering such aspects of crowdsourcing, I can imagine several social tagging perspectives for the online collection of books as well. If you take the one we are celebrating right now with the conference, you will quickly register that the books are a lot less and more poorly illustrated in contemporary publications, mostly by reproductive drawings. This is obviously true because of the fact that book illustration was an expensive enterprise in the 19th century and well up to the times when traditional offset processes were replaced by digital ones. This is a moment where the self-contained book of the print age can be opened up thanks to the logics of online. Why not allow the crowd to look for reproductions in the internet which correspond to the references in the books? If you organize this as a twin process, as we do this in Artigo, you will almost definitely exclude wrong attributions, and you can also remunerate, and now it becomes really hallucinatory, the highly active one by sending him or her something you produce here in the foundation, or even by inviting him or her to the Getty, as some German and American museums are now trying it with Artigo. This certainly sounds extremely strange to your ears, but if you reflect upon it, this might change. For one thing, it is a powerful marketing means for the foundation, as for every other institution in the field. For example, and this is our hope for the museums I mentioned, maybe one day the Getty Museum, which lets annotate its own collection. Further on, and this is a topic very dear to me, and I mean that very seriously, because I think it is strategically important. It implements our subject in a wider public, which might become more and more important because as a humanistic discipline, we are under pressure. And such a project would not be as strange as it might seem at first sight. Advanced theories and projects of editorial scholarship already include the crowd in their practice of text transcription. For so much for the old texts which are not to be treated by optical character recognition. This is, at first sight, a completely idiotic project, but there are several libraries which work with it, and it works, it functions. What we have to confront in case we decide to approach such new procedures is, in the first place, something which is obviously hard to accept for most of us. We have to accept the intelligence of the crowd, and also the idea that in some fields, a layperson's knowledge is not so definitely different from the expert ones. Don't worry, there will remain a lot to do, and mostly the more important parts. And we will also have to accept that we will lose some of the control we had before. I do not think that this is a problem because an intelligent design of such a crowdsourcing platform is a very efficient replacement of current mechanisms of control. But it remains a cultural shift not yet really put into practice. Look, for example, at the digitization projects in museums. Many of them have never been completed, Others take an extremely long time until they are published in the net. Colleagues tend to give the data away only when they are perfectly checked, and a data card where not all categories are completed remains unpublished until even the last bit of information is included. As if this process could ever be finished, we should take the openness and fluidity of digital data more seriously here again. As the process is by definition open, we should be willing to confess this imperfection and publish the data at a relatively early stage. Publish first, filter later here again. Or to put it in another dictum of the digital age, which causes nausea among most of us humanists, and it is very exaggerated, quick and dirty. I deeply admire the way the Brooklyn Museum in New York tackles this problem. They publish a data card at an early stage and they say that the state of perfection is incomplete, and then they invite users to add to their own ideas and knowledge. And there you see it, record completeness, good, 78%. We took that as a point of departure to open our TGO data, our TGO Search social tagging thing by a new layer. You remember the layers, you can put one above the other, which allows them to import their searches in the new layer and then organize their own exhibitions. They do the exhibition, the Web 2.0 exhibition, but we now begin to at once to reflect, oh, he wants to destroy our museum system, which is not true. In the digital world, it is not the zero-sum game. It is normally much more the win-win game. The one will foster the other, and in the end, both will be helped. Different sorts of tagging by a multitude of expert or non-expert users will be vital for a fruitful work with digital online media. Everyone used to such a work is continuously making the experience that he or she is overwhelmed by the masses of information. I said that several times now. In case we will not use the upcoming collection of art historical texts in the way we always did by looking for one specific text we then read, this will, of course, happen again. At the same time, the alternative to look by keywords for something we did not yet know before might be more promising, because it would open up the field into unknown countries of knowledge. And here I would, of course, strongly suggest, at least if it's in any way possible, that there has to be possible a full-text search with the text you have there. I know there are several problems in it. It's just my wish. What does happen here to me looks like a general characteristics of modern times, which confront us with increasingly many options, among which we have to choose the right one. In order not to drown in these masses, some very simple hygienic measurements might be useful in addition, as for example, not to surf from one document to the next, as I often do, and finally, not having learned anything but relenting the process. We have to learn to become slow again, at least when it is necessary, but relenting the process by writing down notes and ideally publishing them in an interactive environment if it exists, or by entering it in Zotero, which I mentioned before. And it has to be published because it must contribute to a massive collaborative filtering process. If not, we will drown. I'm quite convinced that with online media, we are confronted with a paradigmatic shift in as in every other field. As you have understood from my presentation, I am personally looking forward to this with some enthusiasm. There will be a lot to do in order to rationally and fruitfully work with the material, including a new pedagogy and new scientific workflows. If we have the courage to do that, and if you want to, this is my last sub-thesis, the humanities in general, and with them art history, will definitely have a future. If not, they might survive, but only at the margins and with less and less repercussions in the cultural world. Thank you very much. Now we have
So thank you. Is this on? Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that. And again, I guess in the digital humanities, we would refer to this as animating the archive. And, you know, sort of promoting a kind of public participation that's really widespread and active. And I think it is really an optimistic moment for the humanities in that way. I wonder what you think about remix and mashup culture and the way in which the circulation of high culture materials in all kinds of reworkings has also become part of that animating the archive, because everything you've shown has pretty much respected the kind of traditional integrity of these artifacts, but how do you feel about the, you know, Jane Austen and the zombies and, you know, Courbet and Mickey Mouse cavorting together here on the rock?
I have to say, from my origin, I'm a very conservative art historian, and I thought, I mean, I was a little, my courage is not that big that I thought that in the moment where I present something, which I think is very much in some way also against the grain of traditional art history, I should at least remain with very conservative examples. But I tell you, I don't know a real lot in that, but for me this is absolutely fascinating. It is extremely impressive, and culture will only survive if we give young people the chance to do it, but we don't, because we have all the lawyers who tell them if you do that, you have to pay $2,000 million. This is, I mean, we have a huge discussion on copyright problems in Germany now, which is because we have a new party, which a year ago nobody would have ever thought possible that they might ever get 12% of the votes, but they do, and they are called pirates. Germany, your consideration of Germany, and now pirates in Germany, 12%, and they raise the copyright issue. Things are very hard. Very quickly moving, and they will be going down as well, but I don't have to tell you that we live on the brink of catastrophe. Heißt das nicht so? Am Rande der Katastrophe?
At least in Europe. By the way, you know, the idea of the mashup is not a new idea anyway with digital. Because, you know, artists from Picasso to Duchamp and everybody else have done the mashup. For some reason, I think because it's in digital and maybe regular people can do it, it seems more sacrilegious. You know,
yes, it's not the genius who does it.
Yes,
it's a genius.
Picasso imitates Velázquez or mashes up Velázquez, it's okay.
But would you sue Picasso for copyright infringement?
I was very interested in some of your remarks about social tagging too. This has been a dream of ours at the GRI because we have, or at least a dream of mine, we have a captive audience of experts every year who come and are in our residential scholars program and are looking at our materials and special collections all day long. Materials that have, many of them have very skimpy catalog records because we simply do not have the labor to do item-level cataloging of every single thing in special collections. So this kind of expert social tagging is, I think, could be tremendously
social tagging is not only the whole crowd. You can subdivide it, of course. And if we could find a good way to let those old and very, very experienced art historians write their notes. No, so even the younger, but the old. If we try, we can convince them to write their notes, not on their paper and then taking it home, but in an online environment which integrates it in these, as social tagging in the sources. That would be wonderful, but because this is all knowledge which is going to disappear. With the youngers later, but with the oldest earlier.
I was just picking up on what you're saying by saying that in the science community, there's been a shift towards trying to educate scientists to the benefits of doing their note-taking in an already structured environment, an electronic environment, because then they don't have to go through the transcription, the material can be repurposed, it can be used in all kinds of ways. So again, this is impressive.
But the scientists are a lot more open. I mean, for them, it's not problem at all to publish in open access. Who does publish in open access in art history?
Very few.
I remember I asked to the CAA list, I made a question, what do you think about open access? No question, no answer. The only answer that came was, yes, I'm very enthusiastic about image data, open access image database. But no, but they don't. Obviously there are legal problems, for example, but the main problem is that we do not do it. We just don't do it because we have, and this is, of course, understandable. The book has a 500 years old history, which cannot simply be overcome. The book is for us something mythic, although the open access does not exclude the book. We can do it both, hybrid, all this exists. But we are such a conservative community. And then online, you are quoted a lot more often if it is online. But it has the reputation of being unserious, very close to pornography. And
it's true. These are big issues that we deal with. We had I don't know if my colleague Maureen Whalen is still in the room or Gail Feigenbaum, one of our associate directors. Maureen and I gave a presentation on open access journals in art history, and it was really kind of depressing because, first of all, we did a census, and there are very few open access journals in art history, especially compared to the sciences. Yeah. And then, well, I don't want to quote Gail because she's not here, but anyway, oh, you are here, so tell what you said, which was very... Yeah, but, well, it was something like, it was very interesting and electrifying because you said, you know what, art historians will never go for this. And maybe they won't, and then it is disaster.
Yeah, but they will in the end because the printed will not exist anymore, so they won't have any other chance.
Yeah.
Murtha?
Yeah.
Murtha,
Carol Ann.
I also, is this on? Yeah. I should also point, the generational shift is happening and institutional policy is changing. I can quote at Columbia's experience, but it's true at most of the other large research universities in the States, that there's now a mandate at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences that all PhD dissertations must be deposited in an open access repository. Formerly, that would never have been the case. And you can put a firewall so that it's not released for 1 year or 2 years, but that's the end of it. By that time, if you haven't published it as a book or a series of journal articles, too bad, it is open. And so the art history department at Columbia, which is of some significance, took to it like fish to water. I mean, they all of the PhDs are required to deposit their dissertations there, and master's thesis is coming along shortly after that. And the deposit of scholarly articles by members of the faculty and postdocs and senior researchers is quite high as you compare it to other disciplines within the university. So I do not see it as hopeless as maybe presented.
There will be, last year, will be a biological solution, but no, but I also tell you, but you know that the electronic online publication does not exclude the selling of the book. On the contrary, it's the same thing. It's a win-win situation. It's not a zero-sum game. It increases, and there are a lot of examinations on that. It increases the selling, the selling of the book. And now there was an examination, has been an inquiry on file sharing. And there was an American colleague who said file sharing fosters the selling, even those who take part in the Togo film repository, which is obviously illegal. Those are the guys who go to the cinema very much more often. It's not that they file share in order to avoid the cinema. They go also to the cinema. But all publishers, they don't accept it. But I don't see why we should become servants of all publishers. Now, in the whole discussion in Germany, the publishers always pretend that their interests are identical with those of the science of the scholars, which is not at all the case. So I'm beginning to.
I just you brought in the whole question of images, and I would like to to know first your Artigo project. Is it about only images? Do you give only the images and then ask for tagging, or is there also a text? Because in my view, also a text. Because in my view, one of the main problems is to get the content of our project or our portal together with the images. And so how do you envision to get this visual world together with the history of knowledge?
Yeah, that was my proposal. Our project is about textual annotation of images. For you, I would suggest imagistic annotation of text. Because I said, let them find the colored reproductions in the internet of things that are described in those old texts. Oh, I don't think I only need that. Let them search for this in the internet, and then there must be some, if it is outside or within, but probably you are right, you have to organize that outside. And then let them put it as better illustration of the books in the net. It has to be done by two, because otherwise you have a lot of, can you say bullshit loudly? Yeah. But this Louis von Ahn, that is a genius. This is really, he found this very simple solution, and it really does work. And at the same time, and this is very dear to me, you bring people to work with our material, which can, in the long run, but this is now we are interfering with, on the long run, this is a good chance, but this is not what you meant.
Yeah, no, that's not what I meant. But I understand that, and I understand what you are saying. That's very interesting. But I think if we look into the future with our portal, what would be the next utopian step? To bring together the text world, and which represent the history of knowledge about works, without illustrations, or with the illustrations of the 18th or 19th century, but not with the current photographic.
Well, why can't we do the current?
But that's what I'm asking. I'm asking about this utopian vision to bring the Getty Research Portal together with an image portal and link this. And this would be the natural next step. I mean, my staff is killing me if I propose that, but that's fine, and they can do that. But I think we will not avoid that this is going to be the next step.
Yeah, and this is just in order to calm down maybe agitated nerves. This is not to be done tomorrow, because you first have to fill it up. I mean, there has to be more. Sorry. But then automatic matching processes, which are developed to match the image with the text. I mean, we do not want to talk about image databases now. You know that I have a preference which you do not have, but there is someone now. This is of course a new perspective, and I should think. In the end, it is all, it longs for completion. All those projects are always open. They are by definition open.
Just going back to your first slide, which was about science publications and the great unhappiness of not having these be largely, they're not open access. I'm just wondering if there's a vision for, say, government-funded scientific research or humanistic or whatever it might be. Of the requirement, if you're going to receive government funding for this research, you have to publish it in an open access, peer-reviewed, scholarly, perhaps government-funded arm on the web. I mean, is there discussion, is there a move in this direction?
Yeah, there is a move. The German Science Foundations, no, you need the microphone. The German Science Foundation says they signed the Budapest Convention on Open Access and Berlin Declaration, and there are so many declarations and nobody does it. They signed it. What does happen? I was in the board of the German Science Foundation, and after the 10th project came up, I said, do you remember that the DFG had signed the open access treaty? Ah, yes, they said. And then the next project got the order to be published online, but you cannot really order that. That is excluded by law. But the second project coming afterwards, this was forgotten again. I mean, if those who are in the boards are not really imposing it, it won't work. They can sign even 20 further declarations in Berlin, Budapest, or Los Angeles.
I just want to pick up on this in terms of another set of activities people may be aware of, which is the sort of pushback against Elsevier and the stuff that's been going on at MIT and other places. I know, and maybe one of my colleagues here can speak to this. I know that the UC system is starting to move towards the idea that any faculty who publishes materials in any format must also make them available electronically within whatever a particular period of time would be. That, in other words, there's this sense of making a kind of deposit for public access of intellectual content, yep, even if it's published in some other form. So, the science journals may be open access in some ways, but we know that it is also the subscription fees of the science journals and the kind of, cartels of distributors, and they add value. I mean, it's not, we don't want to discount what publishers do and what distributors do, but it has really, been difficult for academic libraries to deal with that particular set of concerns. Yeah. So.
Who did sign the Elsevier boycott? But the publishers do. Oh shit! What I wanted to say. The problem is, in Germany you cannot be forced to publish open. You have personally the decision where you publish something. There's a colleague in Munich, a lawman, a jurist, who wrote an essay on that. Even if you are publicly funded, you cannot be the one who finances. You cannot say that you have to publish it online. That's at least the position of this very conservative Munich colleague. But I'm warm now. But the publishers, I edit a review journal, the Seepunkt, and in every fourth or fifth review, it is noted that again there has not been done any form of lectorate, which is not the problem of American university presses, but in our system where we have a series of only 400, 500 copies, it is not worthwhile doing it. I understand that. But it brings, we have the popans of a printed publication which is well done and an online publication which is badly done. I would say with the Seepunkt, it's the other way around because we do a lectorate in it. And normal, apart from those very famous publishers, they publish it as it comes on the table. I remember my very first collection of essays, they wanted to have a photographic copy of our manuscript. So there you can see what they could do in lectorate, nothing. How do you want to lecturate the copy of something? I don't say the name of the publisher.
Actually, I would like to come back to the proposal of Thomas Gatkins to bring together the portal of the text with the portal of the images. We are right now working on an initiative back in Europe where we have very much the same problem with the copyrights, and we think that we could show a way how that actually could work for images. The situation at the moment in Europe is that we do have a lot of very small but very specific and scholarly on a high level operating image databases from very small collections, from research groups, from archives and so on, and they all are not public available because they don't have the money to do that, and they are not connected to a broader context like a network because they do not have the money to attach to Getty, vocab, and so on. Definitely. But the point is, what we should do in order to use or bring those archives together, we need a framework of public access, what here does the Getty portal, and we need a framework of keywording where we could use the Getty vocabs. And actually, what we try to do is bring them together to use the same metadata standard. We are at the moment bringing together the metadata of Photo Marburg together with our own, not interpretation, but our own databases of the Getty vocab. And that's actually, I think that could be a way. And the next thing we did, we made agreements with the copyright agencies back in Europe that we are allowed to exchange copyright protected images between the universities, and that allows us to give a framework where we could make public access as much as possible, and at least to exchange in a, let's say, limited open access within the academic network where it's required by the copyrights. And by the way, I am convinced, and I'm really convinced, that within 5 or 10 years, the copyright situation back in Europe will have changed.
Yes,
because it's essentially attached to the idea of a physical book.
Yeah, because it is a cultural damage. I remember Gustav Mahler. Do you know when Gustav Mahler had his real reputation? That was it rose to absolute mythic heights. That was beginning in the beginning of the 1980s. And do you know why? He died in 1911, and in 1981 the copyright was over, and then people could work with him. Mm. Those who say that the copyright defends culture in some way, I do not say completely, but in some way they say the contrary of what is true.
If I could add one thing... And
there's another question up there.
I just wanted to follow up on what this gentleman has been saying about my excitement about the Getty portal, and to reconfirm this idea that images are an important part to move on to. If one of your interests with the Getty portal is the collecting more non-Western material and just having that available for people worldwide, there are wonderful collections in European museums as well as in the United States of non-Western objects that also have documentation. Then if the Getty could begin to be a home for that, that would also be a very exciting and useful purpose.
Sorry, probably only the Getty with its name is able to do it, because if I come there, they close the door at once. If you knew with how many museums I tried to make the cooperation, which is, to my mind, very sophisticated marketing tools. If you knew that, I mean, it is devastating in German museums, if I may say so. But now I'm beginning to be as open access that I'm also become attackable. But if you go there with the name Getty, but they will all bow down and they will do everything you want.
You know, I want to say one more thing about the social tagging. I urge you, as you said, to look at the Brooklyn Museum of Art website. This is a really good implementation of the combination of, they've got their structured catalog record over here that they created in their collection management database, and then over here, they let the users add the tags. And they also use some of these tools that you're using in Artigo, where the term has to occur a certain amount of times and then it becomes approved. There is a certain amount of monitoring. If people put profanity or inappropriate words, you can get fired from being a tagger.
And they even did crowdsourced exhibitions. And I tell you, I do not really know the situation, but I think it is done because there's a very nice young information scientist whom they let loose, who says, who's not controlled, who does what she wants. And I'm sure that not the museum people impose that, but she does it. There's a beautiful photography on the side, and it shows her energy, and I love that museum. I only know it's that.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay.
I will not wrap it up. Well, but I want to just say some words of thanks. Again, to my staff, the staff of the GRI who really accomplished this new, astonishing Getty Research Portal. We organized this day in a way to present the Getty Research Portal and to demonstrate its potential. We were open, of course, to the problem that it is a project and that it is at the very beginning. But we will continue to work with our friends and partners on this, and I think we will develop it to a really major tool for art history. But we organized also this day to look a little bit into the consequences. And so where is this Getty Research Portal situated in the whole world of the digital humanities? And I think Hubertus Kohle was talking about that, and also his personal experiences in this world, and Johanna Drucker too. I mean, this is really not an isolated tool. It is has to be seen in a really important intellectual and conceptual context right now. So let me just say thank you, the audience, thank you all of you who participated in the discussion. We will continue in this way, and I hope we will see you again often and develop this project further. And there is one important message: there is a reception outside, something to drink, something to eat, and to continue talking to each other. Thank you very much.